Hey, for this video, I originally planned to draw Deadpool and Wolverine in Infinite Painter. However, I kind of ran into a big fail when it came into that, so I kind of had to switch plans pretty quickly and do something else. So I wanted to share with you exactly that journey and how I turned things around and finally got the artwork done. So first off, I love Infinite Painter. I think it is one of the best Android apps that you can get right now. I think it's like a solid number 2 when compared to something like Clip Studio Paint. And so I tend to use it pretty often. I have drawn in it in the past and created some artworks I was pretty happy with. However, when it came to drawing Deadpool and Wolverine, I sat down, pulled out my tablet, I pulled out my TB League figures, which I use pretty often to come up with references for poses and cool angles. And I got prepared and I got all set up and I was about to sit down and draw these 2 iconic characters together. And for whatever reason, I just couldn't get the right pencil lines to come out. And it's a very frustrating feeling because it's a very indescribable feeling when you're moving your stylus across the screen and it's just not hitting right. It just doesn't feel right. The pressure sensitivity feels off. The brush strokes aren't exactly the ones that you actually want. And you feel like you're fighting against the software instead of the software allowing you to create the artwork that you want. Now, I've run into this issue with Infinite Painter in the past. In fact, in my review of Infinite Painter, one of the cons that I mentioned about the app is the fact that its brush engine is a little wonky. It's a little weird. The activation point is really, really sensitive on the brush. And so it's just a little bit of a struggle to deal with. And normally, the way you would deal with this is that you would jump into the settings, you would play around with the pressure sensitivity until you get something that you're looking for. However, in this case, I did that. I messed around with the settings and I kept trying to draw and trying to get this sketch out, and nothing was working. It was an incredibly frustrating feeling. So I did the next best thing. I decided to jump into the custom brush. I imported some brush tips that I've used in the past. I played around with the settings to try to get it to where I've used it with other drawing softwares like Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint. And again, I tried to draw the characters all over again, and still a very frustrating experience. And I don't know what's happened because, again, I've messed around in Infinite Painter before. I've drawn different types of illustrations in it, and I've been pretty happy with it. Not as happy as I've been in other softwares, but not to the point where I had this type of feeling, this type of frustration. So at some point I had to call it quits and I jumped over to Clip Studio Paint. I love Clip Studio Paint. I think it is the best drawing app out there, regardless of, what system you're using, what device you're using. It's just a really, really solid drawing app. My only gripe with it is that it is a subscription fee if you're drawing on a mobile device. There's a one-time fee if you're drawing on a desktop device and you don't get the updates, but that's okay. That's the trade-off you get for a one-time fee. In a particular case, I decided that it wasn't worth it to keep struggling in Infinite Painter, and it was time to just try to get this illustration out. So I opened up Clip Studio Paint, and I finally started to get drawing. Now, for this illustration, I really wanted to show the different characters of Deadpool and Wolverine. And you can tell with the upcoming movie that they're really going for this buddy cop, antagonist but friends type of vibe with it, which is great. It's the kind of stuff we've seen over and over again. My personal favorite being Rush Hour and Rush Hour 2. So I was excited to sort of play those personalities against each other. So the best way to do that is really through composition is definitely one, expressions is definitely second one, and body language. You can do a lot with body language in your illustrations, especially when you're dealing with an action-y or more exciting illustrations. In this particular illustration, because we're dealing with Deadpool, you are quite limited with the expressions levels of things. I know they do quite a bit with Deadpool in the comic books, playing with how wide his eyes get, and something that's been carried over to the movies itself. But in this particular case, I did struggle with it just because the way the head was pointed in the illustration. So I had to rely on some external tools to communicate what the characters were thinking. So the intention for this one is that, Wolverine's pissed off. He's like, just annoyed with Deadpool and just wants him to shut up. Get that work with the mouth just to finally stop saying things. And then for Deadpool, I wanted him to be really excited, just like really jazzed that he's in a fight with like an icon like Wolverine. And so I drew a couple of like hearts. I tried to play up the humor of Deadpool by swapping out claws in his hands with pencils, the same thing all of us has done as kids. And for Wolverine, he's like the complete opposite. He's not relaxed. He's not having fun. He's trying his best just to like get this guy to just be buried into the ground. So we're showing like the fierceness in his expressions. The brush strokes is a great place where you can be just a little bit looser, a little bit more rough with Wolverine versus Deadpool. I tried to be a little bit cleaner with Deadpool. Tried to clean up sort of those rough textured brushes I was using, so they always end in a hard edge rather than in a soft edge, because he's a little bit more relaxed, he's a little bit more playful, whereas Wolverine, he's very much in rage mode. So I tried to make the brush strokes a lot more rough and a lot more looser, because he's the emotions that he's feeling is just one of less control.
All right, so since we're not doing this illustration in Infinite Painter, I figured I should go over some of the basics that I use when it comes to Clip Studio Paint. So first of all, the version that you see here is the mobile version of Clip Studio Paint. Since I'm drawing on the tablet, I'm not using what they call the simple mode. I think that's what they call it. So I'm using like the full-blown like desktop mode, which is the mode I'm most comfortable with. I know exactly where the buttons are and where everything is laid out. And in terms of brushes, I alternate between different types of brushes when I'm sketching. The most common brush I'll use is a soft round brush. This is a brush I've exported from Photoshop and imported in Clip Studio. When I first started doing digital illustrations, I started off in Photoshop. So using that soft round brush, I grew really accustomed to it, really comfortable. I know how to use it. I have a really good sense of like hand feel with it, which is really important to me. So I tend to gravitate towards that when it comes to sketching. However, with inking, I do play around with a lot of custom brushes. I spend a lot of time like looking at new brushes that are available online. My current favorites are the brush packs from Lucas Pinder. If you guys follow him on YouTube, you'll know that he has like, not only great videos, but he publishes amazing brush packs. And I've been playing around with those and trying to learn how he builds those brushes so I can, learn from that and start building my own brushes that feel a little bit more unique to how I like to draw. So you can see here, the way that I use brushes for inking is that I'll try to use a smooth, solid inker for doing like the initial outlines, for detailing costume bits, and for doing like fine detail. And then as soon as I'm done that, I'll immediately switch over to using a more brushy brush. And that's a brush that sort of has like a softness to it at the edges, has a little bit of a texture to it, doesn't like do a complete fill as you're moving your stylus across the screen. Instead, you can see a little bit of distress or distortion or just a breakup in the inks, and I think that gives a really nice naturalistic tone or naturalistic look to it. I've a couple of years back, fell in love with guys like Urban Barbarian, Sean Gordon Murphy, Matteo Scalera. Like, those guys just do phenomenal work. They mostly work in traditional formats, and I don't have the time that it takes, or sort of the office setup that you need to dedicate to having like a full traditional setup. So I try my best with just my Samsung S9 to sort of replicate sort of their look and feel of using traditional inks. Yeah, so that usually means I spend a lot of time looking for brushes online or tinkering with brushes settings and trying to, get them to look and feel naturalistic. And so the techniques that I use is that I try to have a very soft hand when I'm using those inking brushes, and try to utilize those brush strokes as forms of energy to communicate motion, as forms of emotion itself. So if, character's distressed or angry or, energetic, those brush strokes are great for communicating that. And then also, obviously lighting, being able to, accentuate forms. Just with black and white inks, you can sort of create this sort of mid-tone with these softer brushes that you couldn't do with sort of a solid ink. So that's been really fun to play around with these inks.
And that's the illustration for Deadpool and Wolverine. And like I said, I originally intended for this illustration to be done in Infinite Painter. And I'm not sure what the issue was this time around. So I'm going to be taking some time, spending a couple of weeks, just focusing on learning what is this issue that I'm having with Infinite Painter, with the brush strokes. And hopefully the next video that you see from me, I'm going to be able to report back to you and let you know exactly what went wrong and how to prevent it in the future. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And as always, until next time, keep drawing.